And let me introduce Mark Maryboy, former commissioner in San Juan County, politically involved with Native Americans and for years, and a leader, and we're really glad you made the trip over to teach us a couple things today. Mark Maryboy.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to come and be part of your festivity this week. I think what you're doing is very important for mankind. I saw your agenda. I like most of the items on the agenda. I wish I had time to participate and listen to all of the presentations, but for my part today I will do a brief information sharing with you about Bears Ears National Monument proposal. I have here with me a whiteboard which is in a archaic form. We have one that's a better formalized on a chart, which we will share with you at a later time. I've also brought some brochures and booklets for you to read when we're done with this presentation. I also brought a map of the proposed national monument, 1.9 million acres, and as mentioned in the introduction, I am from Montezuma Creek, Utah, born and raised on the south side of the San Juan River, and spent most of my time in the area, except for the time I traveled to Salt Lake City to study at the University of Utah, graduated with a history degree, and did some work off the reservation. On the south side of the San Juan River, about 5 miles, that's where I was raised, and our next door neighbors was about 7 or 8 miles away, and we had a very close family, and the only information that we received in the family, I suppose it's like that with all Navajos. Your dad and your mom, they're your teachers. My mom was very strong in the history, Navajo history. On this whiteboard underneath, she always talked about the first, the second, the third, and the fourth world. And she talks about when giant animals were around, and you always wonder how many years that is. So recently, when the movie came out, Jurassic Park, the timeline on that was 200 million years ago, so I guess her story goes back 200 million years. And then we have 600 AD to 1000 AD, the Anasazi period. And then she also talked about the arrival of the Mormons in San Juan County around about 1850, 130 years ago. So she used to say, we're in the fourth world. We've been in the county or in the area for millions and zillion years ago, and the Mormons only been here for 130 years. That's what she made sure that we all understood growing up. I was introduced to the environmental issue on the white side and the Navajo side in 1968. in 1968, I was just a young kid. Robert Kennedy came to Bluff, Utah. I don't know if some of you remember the time he came around. His brother was assassinated, as you all know, and Navajos had high respect for President Kennedy. And they talk about some of the speeches that he made in Navajo. Ask not what you can do for yourself, but ask what you can do for your country. That was spoken in Navajo and talked about. So when Robert came, hundreds of Navajos met with him at the footbridge on the south side of the bluff, south side of the river. And most of those elders that were there are now gone. And of course my grandfather and my grandma was there. And at the time they talked about Bears Ears. They talk about the time they used to live there. I was a kid just running around, and then my dad said, sit down and listen. This is very important. So for a very brief moment, I sat down and listened to what the elders were talking about. They were talking about public lands, the lands in the United States. And even back then in 1968, the elders were talking about sacred places, ancient sites, traditional use, biological, ecological species, how important that is to human being, the areas that were sacred, where the Wind people lived, where people went for stargazing, listening, and going to places where the sunlight never touches the ground, a place of worship and springs. And they mention in San Juan County, all of this area, they have names, Navajo names. But in English, these areas are called Grand Gulch, Beef Basin, Cedar Mesa, Cigarette Road, and stuff like that. So they talked about that. That was my introduction. And while I was at the university, I had an opportunity to study some more conservation stuff. So when I became a county commissioner, I was very quickly introduced to multiple use and conservation. I don't know how many of you know Commissioner Calvin Black. He was the gentleman that introduced me to some of the ideology that he has regarding public lands and multiple use. His teaching was, one oil well is better than 10 motels. You can receive more revenue and put more people to work on oil wells. So that was my introduction to the land dispute in Utah, public lands. I served 16 years. I don't know why in the hell I got and it wasn't fun. I had arguments with county commissioners. I represented the folks on the reservation. The main argument was the Navajos don't pay tax. Why should we blade the road? Why should we provide recreation? On and on and on. And every single day, serving on the county commissioner was defending, justifying why we should have received goods and services. And the issue always came down to public lands also. RS 277, roads should be open for more mines, oil wells. And I was a thorn in the side of the county commissioners because I was opposed to that. And I also served on the Navajo Nation Council for 16 years. So I've served 32 years altogether. In the year 2007, I retired from public office. 6 years ago, Senator Bennett started working on, you might say, PLI, or National Conservation Area. He, as you all know, did some work on conservation areas in the state of Utah. So he came down to San Juan County and invited all of the stakeholders to be part of the discussion as to the future of public lands. Navajos were never invited. We just kind of invited ourselves to the entire discussion. And what we did as Navajo is we needed something, instead of just talking, we needed to do research. We needed to do a plan. We needed to put a solid plan together. So the ideal thing to do at the time was to write this book. I wrote this book. I traveled over 200 miles and interviewed close to 90 LTU, and we understand that Secretary of Interior Sally Jewell will be in Utah at the end of this month, and hopefully she will come and visit Bears Ears. And the real sad thing that we're experiencing is the new county commissioner from the reservation, Commissioner Rebecca Benali. She's taken a position to oppose, for some reason, everything that Navajo is working on, not just Bears Ear, Utah Navajo Water Right, voters ballot, redistricting, Utah Navajo Trust Fund. I don't know if they are threatening her. We don't know what's going on. And obviously she's not reading the Bears Ears proposal. She kept saying, telling Navajos, this is, Bears Ears proposal is terrible. You're going to be locked out of the area. You cannot go in there. And I speak for the grassroots people. I don't know who she's talking about. Most of the Utah chapters from the reservation supports the Bears Ears. It's really embarrassing. At one time, people used to say, she's just being ignorant. Now they're saying, she's beyond ignorant. Now they're saying, she's just doing her job. Maybe she doesn't know how to read and write. Obviously, she doesn't understand what's going on. Because of the things that she's saying, we developed this little brochure. And if you look at it, it talks about what you can and you can't do on a national monument. It talks about herb collection, wood collection, protection of ancient sites. It's all in here there. And we gave this to her probably about 30 or 40 times.